As is our custom, if you'd like to come and light a candle for a joy, a challenge, or just to bring more light into this room, please do so while we sit in stillness, listening to the prelude. Please rise in body or spirit for our chalice lighting and spoken affirmation. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom. Reading 453 from the Passover Haggadah. I can't say that. Sorry. Haggadah. Join me as together we remind ourselves of the affirmation that is the cornerstone of our free faith. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. You may be seated.
The ideas that underlie fascist actions are best deduced from those actions, for some of them remain unstated, implicit in fascist public language. Many of them belong more to the realm of visceral feelings than to the realm of reasoned propositions. I call them mobilizing passions. 1, a sense of overwhelming crisis beyond the reach of any traditional solutions. 2, the primacy of the group toward which one has duties superior to every right, whether individual or universal, and subordination of the individual to it. 3, the belief that one's group is a victim, a sentiment that justifies any action without legal or moral limits against its enemies, both internal and external. 4, dread of the group's decline under the corrosive effects of individualistic liberalism, class conflict, and alien influences. 5, the need for closer integration of a purer community, by consent if possible, or by exclusionary violence if necessary. 6, the need for authority by natural chiefs, always male, culminating in a national chieftain who alone is capable of incarnating the group's inherent destiny. 7, the superiority of the leader's instincts over abstract and universal reason. 8, the beauty of violence and the efficacy of will when they are devoted to the group's success. 9, the right of the chosen people to dominate others without restraint of any kind of human or divine law, right being decided by the sole criterion of the group's prowess within a Darwinian struggle. Our second reading is a responsive reading, which you may find on the screen or in the gray hymnal as reading number 440. From the fragmented world of our everyday lives, we gather together in search of wholeness.
By many cares and preoccupations, by diverse and selfish aims, are we separated from one another and divided within ourselves.
Yet we know that no branch is utterly severed from the tree of life that sustains us all.
We cherish our oneness with those around us and the countless generations that have gone before us.
We should hold fast to all of good we inherit, even as we would leave behind us the outworn and the false.
We would escape from bondage to the ideas of our own day and from the delusions of our own fancy.
Let us labor in hope for the dawning of a new day without hatred, violence, and injustice.
Let us nurture the growth in our own lives of the love that has shone in the lives of the greatest of men and women, the rays of whose lamps still illume our way.
And though this says, leader, will you join me in unison? In this spirit we gather together. In this spirit we pray. Thank you. If you'll notice in the program, it lists what's going to happen here today as part 1 and part 2. And I seriously doubt you've ever had a discourse or a sermon which was split into 2 pieces with a hymn in the middle. But that's what we're doing today. Our topic is, may you live in interesting times. Now, I was reared to believe that that was an old Chinese saying that was in fact a curse. And when I finally decided I wanted to see the Chinese symbols that wrote that out, I discovered the information I had was, well, bogus. It isn't Chinese, and it isn't a curse. There are a few things in Chinese that are close, but that isn't one of them. In fact, we're not even sure how the idea that became a Chinese curse ever started. But we do, in fact, live in interesting times. Would you agree? Thank you. Interesting, well, it's an interesting word. How many times have you been told something where somebody is telling you something and you are rather surprised by it or don't agree with it, and then they say, what do you think of that? And in order to get out of saying what you really think, because you definitely don't want to do that, you say, oh, it's really interesting. Have you ever had anybody say to you, oh, you don't like it, when you've said that? And then you have to really justify it if it is, in fact, really interesting. No, I really meant that. This is interesting. It's worth exploring. Most of the time we use it as an avoidance phrase. There are other words that do that sort of thing in English, like we can use the word just in many ways. But if someone comes to you and says, I just wanted to say da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, that just at the beginning of the sentence is a subterfuge. There's something that lays behind it, or they wouldn't feel the need to tell you, I only wanted to. And the point that is important is what lay underneath the just, because then you find, as the old Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. We live in interesting times, and Chinese curse or not, we have the potential of something very bright or something very, very dark. This is not the first time the United States of America, or any country for that matter, has lived in interesting times. It's a common experience of humanity to have times that, what shall we say, try men's souls. The United States, well, 1776 and what preceded it, interesting times. It could have turned out dire. In fact, for many, it did. But out of that, we were able to establish what we call the Great Experiment. The interesting thing is, it's still an experiment. We've had other challenges historically. We won't bother with the War of 1812 or the thankfully successful invasion of Grenada. We can look at the Civil War we faced in this country. A difficult and desperate time, pitting North against South, brothers against brothers, sisters against sisters, families divided, human lives and human freedoms hanging in the balance. And it was a difficult, extremely difficult time in the history of the United States. The Union in the North won that battle. And ultimately, we took the divided states and we brought them together. It was difficult, but we brought them together. We tried Reconstruction, and it was in fact a failure, but nonetheless, the nation survived. In the South at the time, everybody was a Democrat. when I was in college, I wondered why. Because it seemed so clear that the political philosophy of the South was clearly not Democrat. It was, in fact, Republican. And eventually, around the time of the election of President Kennedy, things began to change. And the South swung over to another side. We'll deal with more of that in a minute. Other times that were a tremendous challenge. There's a story of a man named John Burrell. John Burrell got up one morning in Hawaii. He was taking a day off on a hillside where he could look from Diamond Head all across the Pacific to Honolulu. And as he was pouring his orange juice in the kitchen, he looked out the window. He was up on a hillside. And he looked outside and he heard an airplane fly through. And he looked out the window and saw the insignia, a rising sun. He knew instantly what was happening. It was a Japanese plane. He put on his uniform. He called the base. He gave orders to be prepared for what was going to happen. And then he went into action. His name was Captain John Burrell. He ultimately became the captain in charge of the entire supply line for the Pacific Fleet in World War II. You'll never read his story anywhere. Only reason I know it is years later I had a conversation with him in which I expressed my own adverse opinion of the use of armed conflict to solve problems in the world. And he shared with me he felt much the same way. He was my father-in-law. He lived in interesting times. We are living in interesting times. The same kinds of times that all those other people lived. Sometimes we look at it as personalities. There's all sorts of ways that we approach the issues we're dealing with when we live in these kinds of interesting times. And today we name the names of the people who are running for the offices that are in such dire conflict that we have seen a group of people, the population of the United States of America, so completely divided in ways probably not since the Civil War. And when we start looking at this problem, it is not an issue of two human personalities running for top job. It's an issue that runs far more deeply than that, and we have to recognize what that is. You have heard it said in the media, you have heard it said in many places. We are making a decision between an authoritarian government and a democratic one. Oh, a truth in that statement beyond any we've ever thought. It never dawned on me when I was in grade school, when I was in high school, when I was in college, when I was wherever I was. In fact, up until maybe 10 years ago, it never crossed my mind that what we live in, the way we live, whoops, I got to watch where I stand here. Where we live, the way we live, isn't a government that's going to last for 3 forevers. And to be in a circumstance where we actually ask the question, could it come to an end? and take it as a serious question. I want you to understand, as Unitarian Universalists, we live free and easy, able to make expression, able to respect the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, able to respect the world's religions, able to respect people of different races. I don't like the word, but you know what it is. Different races, creeds, colors, able to respect it all. And we live comfortably on one side of that coin and not on the other. Because we are a threat on the other side. And so while I'm not particularly tempted to speak of political issues when I stand before a Unitarian Universalist congregation, this is not just a political issue. This is an ethical issue. It is a moral issue. It is an issue of our beliefs, our standards, and our ability to express ourselves openly and freely. It is a major concern. Like I said, it's not a conflict between two personalities. We have characterized the election currently in the media as being such, but it runs far deeper than that. If the candidates on one side were Mickey the Mouse and Winnie the Pooh, and on the other side, pick Donald the Duck, Howard the Duck. How many of you know Howard the Duck? Oh, good. I'm glad there are a few. It makes no difference. We are not now voting the issue between two people. We are voting a much bigger issue. We are voting the issue of a government so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. And so when we bring questions about the head men, it's a wrong question for us to bring. We are talking about our religious and our moral and our political freedoms that are on the line. The ability to disagree with others and still work with them and make life possible in a country that may, sometimes we question it, be the greatest place to live there is. It's very important for us to realize that when we express ourselves in relation to the milieu within which we are going to live next year and the year after and 10 years from now and 50 years from now, we take seriously what our responsibility is. I wish personally everybody that was a citizen in this country was required to vote. Everyone. That be one law that is held inviolable, but it isn't. Which means if we are going to see the freedoms, the openness, the separation, if you will, of church and state, we have to invest our time and our effort to preserve what's really at risk. And with that, I would like you to sing a hymn. This is a hymn that is the cardinal hymn of the Unitarian Universalist movement. Rank by rank, again, we stand. At the General Assembly, when we have the service of living tradition, this is the first thing we sing. And I ask you to join me as we and the choir sing rank by rank. Part 1 is done.
Go past 2 slides.
2 slides. We bypassed 2 slides. Bet you could hear me better then. We bypassed 2 slides because one of those slides was a fascis. How many know what a fascis is? Anybody have a dime in your pocket? On one side of that dime is a fascis. Can you roll back 2 slides and show us the fascis? There. It's on screen. That's a fascis. It's a symbol of the Roman Empire, a bundle of sticks with a axe in the middle, not an ordinary axe. It's a battle axe. It's an axe that stood behind the motto, peace through victory. And that's the symbol that marched with every fascist regime that's ever been, including Adolf Hitler. Now you know what it is. So when you hear that being applied to anybody in this country, you know what it's talking about. I'm opening this up as a forum. I've laid a lot of things out here. I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your responses, questions, statements, disagreements. It's time for you to speak. In every congregation, it seems only right the voice of the people be heard.
Jan up here.
Jan.
Okay, what I'm curious about is why is this symbol so important to that it's on our coins? If that's what it stands for, what's the? I'm curious.
She didn't say it was interesting. She said, I'm serious. Does anybody know the answer to that question? Allow me to use a religious term. It beats the hell out of me.
That's the answer.
From the e pluribus unum, from the many become one as they're bound together.
Oh, there have been lots of interpretations of it. It doesn't tell me why we use it, given what it stands for. And it's a well-known symbol. Nobody knows what it's called. That's where the word fascist comes from. A person who ascribes to the motto of that symbol, peace through victory. That means you get peace after you've killed everybody.
Okay, as far as what exactly does fascist mean in the current context of governing, who are we calling fascists, and are we correct, and why do they also call us fascists?
That's an excellent question. Anybody want to respond with any ideas they have around it? Why did I watch 3 people wipe their noses but not bother to raise their hand any further? I have a statement around it. There is one group that's constantly worried about fascists. And who do they point to normally? Well, go.
Conservatives wanting to rule.
Thank you, Jan.
The reason why conservatives call us fascist is they're projecting. They say it because we say it to them, and they want to turn it around on us as opposed to, reality.
For that observation. I would note, you go first before I do, please.
Why do we have war if we did nothing wrong?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that clearly.
Why do we have war if we did nothing wrong?
That's a good question. Usually, can I repeat that question? Why do we have war when we've done nothing wrong? War is not usually because someone's done something wrong. War is usually based in the fact that someone wants control and power and wants to see to it they get it whatever the cost. And that's why war happens. And to make an observation on what was said, they're projecting. I have said for years, you want to know what a certain party is actually doing, what is their philosophy of governing, what are their intentions in policy, see what they complain about in the others. If you can draw attention to another point, then it means it doesn't happen that they look at you. So it is a distraction. It points in another direction. When I did the reading on fascism, did you recognize anything in the requirements of fascism? Someone is the only one who can solve the problem, the only one who has the answer, that everything in the world is falling apart, and the only way we can correct it is we are faced with that. That is a serious problem. I see it not simply as a political problem. I see it as a spiritual issue, which brings up something else. Why is it that it is among conservative evangelicals we see the greatest support for this? This is not an issue between democracy, it is as a way of life. It is a determination of whether we have democracy or autocracy. Whether we have the rule of the people or the rule of one. And the opposition is not interested in democracy. The purpose is they wish to have in this land a theocracy. Do you know what a theocracy is? The rule of God. Can any of you speak for God? I heard that. I've tried, but I don't.
Then the only person that can solve everything becomes the God.
And someone inevitably is the one who wishes to solve everything. The South has indeed backed this regime, and it's not just one very large group, although it's primary. It is an attempt to make the United States a Christian nation. This whole thing came to a serious head with the election of President Kennedy. I don't know how many of you can remember back to when that was going on, but among conservative Protestants, there was this tremendous fear. If Kennedy is elected president, we will come under the authority of the Pope, and Christendom will be brought back in the United States. And he will answer to the Pope, and he'll do anything the Pope says. That was not our experience, if you'll notice, when he was elected. But it catalyzed the South in such a way that they made a decision. And by the way, I want to share with you, at that time, I was part of that conservative evangelical movement. I watched it happen firsthand. A few of those people that are still leading it today, I knew personally. And I've watched over the years as their groups and organizations have considerably. We have been in a cold civil war since 1877 and the failure of Reconstruction. Reconstruction was the attempt to do a Marshall Plan like we did at the end of World War II in Europe, and it failed. And since then, there has been this continual erosion until we can now bring the theocracy to bear, and they have a champion. This is serious, folks. I want you to hear this because you need to think seriously about how you feel around this and how you tell everybody to respond. This isn't a just get out the vote. Your life is on the line. My life is on the line. I'm not a part of that movement because somehow I found out I couldn't believe anybody could speak for God, especially me. I have trouble speaking for myself. Other responses? Anything that anybody wants to say?
An observation of the dime, you said to look on the back, and if you look on the back of the current dime, the Roosevelt dime, it's symbolic in the sense that in the Mercury dime, it was a fascist.
Yeah.
Fascist. Now it is a torch that looks like the burning of a fascist. I think that's very symbolic, especially since it was put into circulation in 46.
Thank you.
1946.
Thank you very much. The actual turning point was in the early 60s when this became we have to make this nation a Christian nation. Yes.
I have a few observations. As someone who was around when Kennedy was president, he at least was able to make a joke of all the criticism of his being a Catholic. He supposedly sent a telegram to the Pope after his election and said, "Unpack." And also, I noticed that the side that wants to do away with our democracy tries to co-opt all the terms that people like they say, we're the true people for democracy.
Yeah.
And the leader of the current group that is opposed to democracy said at one point, "I alone can fix it."
I
And
alone
that's
can fix it.
Autocratic.
Yep. Same thing Adolf Hitler said. It's true. And I don't know about you, but I can remember where I was when Kennedy was assassinated. How many of you are here? Yeah. That means we've been around since dirt was young. You know that. Other responses, other things to say? Then I believe we have come to a conclusion. I want to thank you for the opportunity to do this. I want to encourage you, especially where we live. It is important we speak up, that we preserve our freedoms. That's actually even the freedoms of our opponents, which are at threat. And so may we take this seriously, not simply as a political issue. This goes way beyond mere politics. This is a spiritual issue. This is a religious issue. This is a moral and ethical issue. This is an issue that brings before us the value of human life. And we should treat it as if it's potentially our last great act, because it could be. Thank you for letting me speak to you today. It is time for those of us who would like to take the opportunity to give to this congregation. It is a great cause and most worthy, and you can either give here or take advantage of the opportunity to give online. And we shall take the opportunity here to give at this point. our parting thought and our closing words. This is taken from Philippians 4. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honorable, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. So be it. We extinguish flame, but not the light of truth.
Every day if I choose, whether joy and love will win or lose, as close as friends and family or as big as the world, this work I will embrace and I will